We're on warm-up mode.
Thank you for enduring our thumbnailing.
We are on warm-up mode, everyone. So as always, if you are there, send in a comment so we know you're there.
Yep. We're gonna spam the link to the stream.
So now instead of an itchy nose, I have sniffles. I give up. I think my nose will always want attention the moment we have a show. Beep, beep, beep. Warming up mode.
We just tried to book tickets for Kylie's Infinite Disco. Very exciting. It's an international streaming event. They don't want to call it a concert because it's not quite a concert because there is no interaction, which is valid, right? To be concerned about.
Actually, I'm wondering if it's not a concert because it's not live singing and performing.
I think so because there are multiple times that they're presenting, and you buy a ticket for a time slot.
And it might be more like a group watch.
Yeah.
Maybe she'll talk about the songs and the music, but it's a one-way discussion. Or maybe it will be open for people to talk to and she'll respond to comments like what we're doing.
I don't think so.
Hard to tell.
But still excited.
Hey,
but
Andre.
couldn't purchase today because BPI aggressively thought it was fraud. The fraud department is closed, so I will not be able to unblock the transaction until tomorrow.
Yeah.
Hello, Dre.
And then today we'll have the weird, I will leave my seat at a latter part of the show because I will need to...
We haven't eaten.
I'll need to stop the oven before it burns dinner away.
Should probably take it out of the oven. Or you're going to leave it a bit?
I might just leave it.
At most, it'll be 10 minutes, I guess.
Yeah, so that's okay.
So we're going to keep this short. No. And generally on time as we talk about today's topic. But people have not joined yet. It would be nice to join. Not that we're saying that you're not a person, Dre. We appreciate you. But I know you also want more people to be there. Now, this was actually a suggested topic, but it was written as character development. But then when it's like character development, but examples were like race and stats and whatnot, and then it's character creation. So we're gonna talk about character creation.
No, 2 more minutes. Well, 1 more minute.
Infinite Disco. Infinite Disco. $20.
Oh, Andre, now you know how it feels like when we're running the show.
Yeah, that's how we feel like in general, just shouting at our screens and like, hey, how are you? Hi. And we've streamed to very little people.
What you can do, Andre, is to share the link now or share it on Messenger to friends you know who might be interested in the topic.
Yes.
That's the best way to have more
Find
people.
friends. Fish are friends, not food. I think I just retweeted. So he's online.
Hey, Jay has joined us.
Hello, Jay.
Wasn't expecting a stream on a Wednesday. That's true. Normally, we don't have a stream on Wednesdays, but as it so happens, our Wednesday gaming group is not available, so we decided to have an episode anyway. Which is...
and in honor of them, it's a tabletop RPG.
Admittedly, we ourselves are not accustomed to a Wednesday show, which is why I have food in the oven that I will have to run to in the middle of the show.
So yes, it's an added challenge for us today. But
there is the temptation to just bring it lower since we're
But
leaving
then
it
it
longer.
might-
But it might mess up the cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's better to close it, leave it, then it will sit in the heat for I think about 10 minutes, then we should be okay.
Mhm.
Then we'll rush eat because my eating window ends at 10.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay.
Now's a good a time as any to start. Okie dokie. Timer starts now. This is Toby.
And this is Rocky.
And if it's your first time here, welcome to Baduy, a little space on the internet where we talk about anything we want.
This is completely unscripted and not entirely accurate, but at least it's honest. Join us. We talk about everything and anything, random live.
And if it's not your first time here, thank you so much for joining us again. We are spending the next 30 minutes, probably shorter. No, at least 30 minutes.
No, at least 30 minutes.
Talking
Don't worry.
about creating characters for tabletop role-playing games.
While roasting a chicken.
Now, I will admit that's a pet peeve of mine. I hate the fact that we have to say tabletop role-playing games and not just role-playing games, even if role-playing games came first. But that's how the world works.
Toby is that gamer.
Computers have stolen that term and made it their own. So we now have to say tabletop RPGs. Because if you say you play RPGs, people will say, oh, like Final Fantasy. That's the world we live in.
But to be fair, now there's also JRPGs because it's a specific subset, but it still refers to the computer-based RPGs
Because admittedly,
of a Japanese flavor.
A lot of role-playing games now, when you talk about Western games, are simply games that have role-playing game elements.
Yeah, stats,
God
character
of War
progression.
is considered a role-playing game.
Isn't it just like an action something game?
Action role-playing game, adventure role-playing game. Which is why now the distinction of the JRPG was necessary because JRPGs tend to be the turn-based,
crunchy, grindy games.
The beautiful old schoolness. But that's not our topic today. That's a topic you can suggest. Our topic today is about creating characters for tabletop role-playing games.
Yeah. So as I mentioned in the description and the posts advertising today's session is that we're going to try to keep this system neutral. So it's not going to be tips on creating characters for any specific game. And I think that's a lot more because to be fair, there are general principles that can apply across games.
Yes.
That should work, except for maybe super system-like games like Shao and Martin. There's not much character creation.
Now, in as much as we will use some games as examples,
that is true.
Do not assume that the tips apply to those game systems alone, unless we otherwise say so directly.
Yes. If you're in a Toby game for White Wolf, then your wits is probably going to be 3 and your dex is going to be 3.
Unless it's the older version, then it's perception and not wits. So
wits is still important because and awareness or anything that is like that awareness, alertness. These are the Toby stats.
Okay. So when it comes to when it comes to creating characters for role playing games, what would be your first tip?
Me, it's think about what you want to celebrate in the genre of the game, right? Then depending on if you're in a vampire game, what kind of a vampire do you want to be? What one thing about being a vampire do you want to do? If it is a pulp RPG set in that sort of 1920s flair, then what kind of a pulp hero are you? And just trying to figure out that core concept that hopefully the system supports. And you may not know if the system supports it. You may have to talk to your storyteller, GM, DM, whatever you want to call it, to figure that out. But it basically just find your focus, I think. Find your focus for your character. And that's most likely going to be the thing that you want to do awesome.
That you want to explore in the game the most.
Yeah.
In relation to that, I guess I'd add, because what I'm thinking of is you can share a tip and then I'll see what I can add to that specific
yes, because, okay, and then for context, I typically play more RPGs and Toby is the one who tends to run more RPGs. Although, of course, we have also played both roles because we're versatile that way.
Yes.
But, Toby's still the superior GM between us and I am, I just play a lot.
So when it comes to coming up with that concept, if you need more than 3 sentences to describe that concept, you're now going overboard. The best thing about the concept is you could sum it up in 2 sentences if possible. because that then allows other players and the GM to work with that concept and bring it further. The moment you start coming up with a concept that's too complicated, you're writing a story. And the moment you're writing a story, other people will either not have the time and patience to learn your story, so they'll just ignore your story.
That's sadly true.
Or they become so obsessed with your story, they're now afraid of doing things wrong whenever they interact with you.
Sorry, I must highlight that Urim says he normally plays stealthy characters. No, you do not.
So,
But it's okay.
yeah. And in relation as well to that, Rocky mentioned about knowing what you want to celebrate with that character, knowing what you want to play in a pulp setting, for example. I'd go even one step backwards and bear in mind what you've agreed as a group you are playing.
Oh, that's a good
And
point.
from there, know what you want to play. Just because it's a vampire game doesn't mean you're all on the same page. Everyone can possibly have a different interpretation of what a vampire game might be, even if you're looking at the same game system. One
Yeah.
might think of a vampire game like Anne Rice's Vampires, where it's all about love and passion and hunger. But then another
and curly
player
hair.
then another player might say it's more like Blade, where it's all about violence and action and
Cheesy makeup.
yummy
And
Stephen Dorff.
Okay, I knew you were going to bring up Stephen Dorff. Okay. Yeah, so there are different. Okay, then yes. Then depending on the agreement of the
Mhm.
group in terms of what style of game you are playing or what type of a story you're playing, then you want to figure
Find
that
those
out.
niche. Find your niche. Find your. This is what makes me awesome in this group.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I guess that also kind of spins into another tip really is that I mean especially most tabletop RPGs are group
Mhm.
games, right? It's there you can play so just a GM and a player or just two players in the GM-less system. Toby has a system like this. But more importantly, it's that there should be some degree of coordination and I don't feel it is metagaming to coordinate your concepts
Yes.
to figure out that everybody is awesome at something and you don't have too many duplicate characters that
Mhm.
you don't end up with like a party full of healers or
Yes.
we're all outcast rebels.
Mhm.
Then that's going to be very tricky.
Unless that's the point of the game you're playing. I mean,
That's true.
It is possible in this day and age for a group to go, "Oh, let's have fun. Let's all be healers," and that becomes the fun thing about it, and that's fine.
Yeah, it's like we were talking about when we were mapping out our characters for the Labyrinth RPG. What if we are all worms?
Mhm.
Worms adventuring in the labyrinth. I don't think we will beat the 13-hour deadline, but we might have a fun story. So, yeah, it's possible. But again, it's basically coordinate with your group and figure out what niche each of you wants to fulfill.
Mhm.
And so me personally, I try to be the one who's like whatever. I like to see what everybody else will do, and then I like to fill in the gap. Only
Mhm.
because I obviously in most games that Toby runs, I play, so I get to play a lot of games.
Mhm.
And then I support new people, especially new people to the table, who want to try different concepts. Then feel free. Let's figure out your concepts first, and then I can always support.
Mhm.
Because admittedly, I've reached the point where I definitely super enjoy exploring new ideas. So I have played against type a lot.
So Andre just adds because you were saying support. Most likely, I'll play a support or DPS type of character for any game. Now that is an interesting to bring up because as Rocky mentioned in a talk he gave some years back, in many ways, everyone actually gravitates or
To a certain
falls
playstyle.
into a specific playstyle, and that playstyle tends to be a shadow or a reflection of your true self. You might find yourself saying, "Okay, I want to
This
try.
talk is on YouTube.
I want to try a violent character this time, or I want to try a detective this time." But then, if you really objectively look at how you're playing that character, you'll realize you're starting to hit the same notes more often than not. No matter how much you're the violent character, no matter how much you're the detective character, if you're the type who likes to talk your way out of situations, you'll still keep trying to do so. Likewise, if you tell yourself that, I'll be the brainy guy this time, I'll be that, but deep down, you still find yourself always rushing headlong into battle, always being the first one to deal with a combat scene. then that just simply means deep down your true self tends to prefer the confrontations,
Direct
the
resolution.
combat.
And it doesn't mean you can't play against type.
Mhm.
It's just that you may. I find that gaming helps bring this out and surface this aspect of us,
Mhm.
and it's pretty interesting. Like I am definitely a talker. I thought I'd be a brainy character. No, I'm a talker, and I try to reason
Mhm.
my way out of things. So that's the
And
thing.
and how the GM reacts to that can differ. Some GMs might say, no matter what you're saying, roll it. Then let's see if your stats back up how good you are as a player.
Mm-hmm.
And other GMs might let you get away with stuff that you come up as a player, even if the character won't necessarily come up with that.
Yeah.
So that's where you have GMs wherein the player might have really low intelligence scores, but since they're normally the tactical guy, when they yell out tactics and everyone follows them, it's fine. And that's fine too, as long as it works for your group.
Yeah. Again, it's a
Sorry,
it's
you're new people like me.
I saw that too.
Right, Yurim.
Urim,
Right.
among our friends, I think, is one of the best at iterating multiple characters. Whenever we say
I'm killing you.
we're gonna start a new game, Urim will generate 20 characters until he figures out what he might possibly play, and then he's still going to be tweaking it on day one,
And
which is
20 is
great.
an understatement. By the
Yeah,
way.
yeah. So new player, you whatever Urim. Okay, so so what's that? You kind of have your character concept in mind. Then it more often than not, games have stats. Then you're gonna want to align to that, and again, make sure that there is one thing that you can do well. If it is the thing that whatever that core concept is, you want to be the stealthy vampire. Then you need to make sure that you have whatever magic, discipline, skill, stats that at least let you do that. And that will kind of dictate maybe your stat build. There a lot of the new systems these days give you like presets for like combinations of stats that you can try and things
instead
like
of
that.
the random roll.
Yeah, instead of random or instead of making you pick and you not knowing where to go. I mean, a lot of White Wolf games when I first started, it's like, oh my god, I don't know where to start. So think about the one thing you want to do and figure out the stats needed to do it.
Now,
So, yeah.
For some, that sounds like min-maxing. And I will state now, min-maxing is not bad. Min-maxing
not inherently bad.
or optimal builds is not bad at all. It's only bad if you're finding ways to exploit the system. But if you're finding ways to use the system to represent the character better, or to represent the fact that in the gaming group, your character's the strong guy. So of course, you will make sure you have the strong stats and you'll have the powers that allow you to hit harder.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't think you should like. This isn't a Psylocke situation where you will focus all your stats to the focus totality of your abilities. I say that at the very least, make sure you can do the one thing you want to do, and then the rest of your stats can kind of just fall where they may to round out your character. Because at the very least, if you don't know where to begin, you want to be able to do that. And that when it comes to that moment, like I am the guy who's good with a gun, and then it comes to the scene that you want to shoot, but you've spread your stats out evenly, then you may not be the awesome shooter that you say you are in your character concept. So yeah, at least do the one thing. I think that gives focus.
Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, also consider what you're choosing to have as your lowest stats. For many players, they choose the stats that they don't plan to use the most.
They think they won't.
People who don't like talking their way out of situations, the hell with charisma.
Appearance 1.
Players who don't think that they engage in combat scenes, they won't buy combat stats. And while that isn't necessarily bad, it does pay. There is value in looking at it beyond just something you don't want to do, but more as something that reflects the character's personality. Is the absence of combat skills not just because you're not the type of player who likes combat, but because the character itself is a pacifist or hates violence? Consider those opportunities to explore their personality more. Flaws are always another way that personality can come in. They aren't necessarily just points. While I know many choose to grab flaws because they're funny or they're fun, If your group,
To be fair, it's like dark secret, amnesia, these little things. Anyway.
if your group is not looking for a game that's meant to be in that humorous slant, then at least respect that and try to find flaws that better support the game that you want to play.
Jay has a tricky question. How is stat allocation done? Because he's a total noob. This is definitely a system specific question.
Mhm.
Some systems, like the classic D&D, way back, was literally you roll a die and that's your stat
Yeah.
per one, then you fill it in. A lot of other systems give you like an allocation of dots. For example,
For
White
allocation
Wolf,
of points.
allocation of points, and you put those points in the slots. So it depends. It depends on the system you're running.
Mhm.
But there is always a character creation section that will guide you through it.
Mhm.
And then at the very least, you can always seek guidance from your GM, DM, storyteller, and at least come with him saying that, hey, I want to be able to do this in the game. How do I do that?
Yeah.
And they should be able to help.
Generally, most games have stats because they want to represent characters that are good or bad at something. There are some other indie games that approach stats less as a reflection of the character and more as a reflection of the player having control of the narrative. So I might have more points when it's about combat. Rocky might have more points when it's about romance.
Social.
And basically having those points allow you to say more in the story about that.
Apparently, I'm a charmer. No.
So it's a lot depending on the system itself. Many systems now try to simplify this by allocating specific roles. So if you're this role, you have this as your highest stat immediately. And then you now just have to allocate some of the other points in other areas. I know Dungeons and Dragons has done something similar as well now.
That's true. And then there's the super easy to get into games. Like any game powered by the Apocalypse typically has preset combinations
Numbers that
of
you just,
stats. Yeah, then you just plug them in. So that helps. And as long as you have a generally good idea of your character in mind, then whatever the system is, I think you'll be able to figure out where you want to put your stats. So don't worry about it. And people will help.
Okay. Next tip, don't be an island. A lot of new players, because of the pressure of having to come up with such a complicated story, which they feel is necessary because they see other people coming up with really complex characters. Embrace flaws like amnesia, orphan, only survivor, because that allows them to simply say, I don't remember, I don't know anything,
I don't have family, I don't have any social ties to anyone.
And fine, I guess
it's a concept.
That's okay when you're choosing to do that, when you're starting out. But if you really want to start having characters that others can connect with, that the GM will enjoy pulling into scenarios where stories can come in, then don't be an island. Have NPCs that connect to you in positive and negative ways. Do you have an ex-lover?
Do you have an arch nemesis?
Do you have children? Are you still visiting your parents? Consider these things. And I know some games do actually make it a mechanic. You have contacts, you have allies, you have...
Yeah, I appreciate games with things like bonds, for example, in Powered by the Apocalypse games, where you literally define pre-existing relationships with the other player characters at the table, which gives you a nice bit of flavor. Sometimes there are system benefits to playing this. Sometimes it's just a connection. It's just something you can cite. And that's cool. I mean, you are playing the story together, and it's kind of, implied, assumed that sooner or later you're going to want the party to come together.
Yes.
Then have reasons for that. That's not the quack. Okay.
No.
So that's
the oven.
That's the oven. Chicken is almost ready. Okay. So, and then kind of tying to that is balancing the value of backstory. And this, I will admit, this is more a personal thing, I think. I don't necessarily think it's an absolute rule, but your backstory can be super intricate and long, assuming, for me, as long as it matters to the player group or to the story that you are shaping, then cool. Write as many hooks as you want, connect as many characters as you want. But then if it's like a super long backstory, but you don't want it in the story, then it's kind of weird. Then I'm not, as another player at the table, I'm probably not going to be invested in finding out about your backstory. So you're just writing short fiction.
And you're having everyone wait for you to finish it, and then they won't use it.
Yeah, which is kind of weird. And then, and you can't expect everyone to, I don't know, interrogate you in game about your backstory to find out about it. So there is always going to be that sort of that shared player experience, which feels kind of meta, where you want to throw out like, hey, I was an orphan, but maybe you can be my long lost brother, and we'll find out in game.
Or even stuff like, so we're not really close or we're not really friends, but maybe in the past we encountered each other. So now in the story, I remember you. It could be something like that.
That's more fun backstory elements than I am the fifth son of the fifth son of the blah 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 from a long line of something.
And we will not talk about it because I don't like talking about it.
Yeah. It's like, it's a secret.
Don't underestimate nor discount tropes. I know there's a general feeling that tropes are bad, and I know there's this general mindset that if you're doing something predictable, then you're predictable. But
are you making a generalization about tropes? No.
But the truth is, having characters that are more predictable or more tropey actually makes it easier for others to interact with you.
Especially if you're playing with a mixed group that includes newer players or players you're not familiar with. Then one man's trope is another man's niche protection, right? Then as long as you have a very focused concept, you know that he's the stealthy ranger who's practically Batman, then he's going to be sneaking around and shooting arrows from trees and stuff. And that's cool. And other players can work with that very quickly. That, hey, we need to infiltrate. You're the stealthy guy. Can you do something about that? So then you're still celebrating the individual things that each player at the table is good at. And it kind of bridges the gap and you don't have to role play scenes of, hey, do you know I'm a stealthy assassin and I am great at sneaking around? Oh, is that so? We should incorporate that in our plan. So I mean, you don't have to do that.
Related to that as well is the fact that when you are struggling or when you are purposefully trying to not be a trope, then what tends to happen is people might have certain assumptions about the character, and you will spend a lot of more time just correcting them rather than going along with what they assume. You'll have a guy who's playing the great warrior, the great fighter, and then another player will go, "Hey, you're the one with the legendary sword, right?" And you, not wanting to be tropey, "No, I don't use swords. I actually use blah 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 blah." And suddenly, whatever they had in mind to introduce into the story when they were talking to you that moment, they stop because suddenly, oops, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And now I don't want to say more things that will be wrong. I will not say anything. And I guess
happens.
If you were with a group that's already used to each other, then it's fine.
Yeah.
You could, catch each other by surprise with this little meta game of, actually, no, I'm a fighter, but I never use weapons. And that's fine because you're now all in that joke and you're all laughing and enjoying it. But if you're playing with new players
or unfamiliar players
who are, at that point in time, still finding the confidence and the comfort level of playing the game, and now they feel like just interacting, I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, even the most experienced players, once you're thrown into a new group, you can't help but be a little wary, defensive, and I don't, and this is just a personal philosophy that you're gonna try to want to make everybody at the table feel welcome and feel free to throw in ideas and contribute to the story, because that's how you make awesome stories together.
Yes.
So yeah, don't let your character somehow get in the way of this. That should be the least of your problems.
On a similar note, when you create your characters, a very common idea is to have something they are determined or obsessed over, or
have a goal.
But many then make the mistake of seeing it's the goal and nothing else matters.
Yeah, then they're like super narrow, one-dimensional characters.
Or they now force everyone else to try to find a way to make that goal meaningful to them as well. And I know some concepts will lean towards that. Like, for example, you have paladin like characters who, no matter what, I must do this for my god. But if you are now trying to hog all the focus, then you are literally hogging all the focus. The other characters will hate you, and the players will probably rather just do stuff without you. Um, Consider how in many other media, especially comic books, for example, you will have loner characters like Wolverine who still do interact with the team.
Yes.
They will spend those scenes complaining about how they might have done it better if they did it
Alone.
alone,
Yeah, yeah.
or maybe, if I were in charge, we wouldn't be in this trouble, Cyclops. But they're working with the team.
Mhm.
And that's a good guide to how you can have characters who might be single-minded or devoted to a cause, but are still working with everyone else.
Having Urim here reminds me of my one Dungeon World character who was a cleric,
Hmm.
um, and jokingly was obsessed with his god and trying to get people to convert to his religion.
Mhm.
But eventually, other players played along and all joined my religion. So I mean, so it's not to say that these goals can't happen, but
Yes.
don't super force it. Let the other players
Mhm.
engage with the.
Know when to
the
pull
thing.
back and
Yeah.
agree with them for that scene.
Read the room, people. Read the
Yes.
room. But then everybody worship Bob the god, and that is awesome.
Mhm.
Hail Bob. So, um,
I'm just double
Yeah.
checking if there are other comments. Mitch says, love the sessions. Yeah, Jerem says, shoot first, stealth later. Okay, so other more specific tips when it comes to creating your characters.
one thing. Oh, sorry. Were you
Yeah.
saying something?
No.
One thing I think that we found that works really well with our games is visual pegs based on popular fiction.
Mhm.
Sometimes you mean the actress that you really just like this look, but it might be better to pick a character. Like rather than it just being my character is Meryl Streep, my character is like
Meryl-
Devil Wears Prada Meryl
Meryl
Streep. Then it's a lot more specific. And again, it ties to that you have one sentence that captures your
Mhm.
character concept or at least your character demeanor. Then they know that you're cool, aloof, in control.
They immediately now can visualize how you react. They immediately can now build little moments where you enter the room. I compliment you on your outfit because obviously you're well dressed. And then you now have that. And that's the point. By helping each other know where you're coming from with your concept, then you allow them to play with it even without you spending so much time describing everything.
To some degree, this also helps with creating NPCs. So Toby does this all the time for NPCs, and like there was a span of several years where Dame Judi Dench was in every game we had, and you kind of knew, especially based on her look, at it's that Dame Judi Dench. It's Queen Elizabeth Judi Dench. It's M from James Bond Judi Dench. It's like different stuff. So it goes both ways. It's not just for player character, but even for
Mhm.
NPCs. It just helps. Again, it ties to that. It gives people an instant way of recall and memory and understanding,
Mhm.
and it helps people jump into the role play a lot faster.
Consider having a mannerism or a saying or a motto that helps make your character more distinct in some ways.
Oh, hello, David. And
Yeah.
I remember,
Yeah.
I had a Toreador vampire who was an
Book.
artist.
This is
No, it's Dor.
Door.
Dor the Toreador.
Dor
And he
the
was an
Toreador.
artist, and he was just always so flighty. And his thing was being obsessed with painting
Mhm.
paintings with red paint.
Cerulean.
No, cerulean was. Do you have a word for us? And like cerulean. So it was super crazy. And the same way that from active characters now, it's like I like my Wraith character who's super flighty. I play her blonde, even though she's not. Oh, she is blonde. Sorry, I made her blonde.
Mhm.
But I play her blonde, and I keep thinking of like legally blonde isms, but not that she's stupid, but she does tend to like be shallow,
Mhm.
and players ride along with that. They know that it's a Melissa moment, and
Yeah.
Melissa's gonna obsess about her appearance and all that, even though she's literally a ghost, So whatever.
And it's stuff like that. You again come up with these little things which allow the players to build up on or recognize. Maybe your character will always end up wanting to grab a cup of coffee in a scene. And it doesn't have to be super. You're obsessing, and I can't do anything unless I have coffee. Um,
You could just be like a game of detective where every other card they have to have coffee.
and then it can become an interesting plot element wherein, let's say, your character suddenly discovered something disturbing. So in the scene, it starts off and you declare, "I don't have a cup of coffee," and everyone's like, "Whoa, what
Then
happened?"
it has meaning. Then it's more fun for everyone. So yeah, you play up to that.
So come up with mannerisms or a little thing that they like to do, because people do have habits. People do have little quirks.
Yeah,
My nose always itches at the start of the show.
that's a terrible trope.
Some people will always, always take the time to make a marking on their food before they eat it and stuff like that. Find those little quirks that you can use and incorporate into the story. And your other players might find ways to even incorporate it in their own ways. Names.
I was gonna get out of my head. Okay, the last thing, because we're running out of time, is talk about names. Okay, on the one hand, names is the hardest thing to figure out. Admittedly, I use a lot of
I have no name.
I Google search for period specific, country specific, language specific. You want some sort of a no, you can't see it.
Okay, Google is reacting.
Google's trying to search what I'm saying.
Because you just said Google.
Yeah, and then that's well and good, but I guess make sure your game is thematic to the tone of the story or the type of game you are playing. If you are a serious game, then maybe a stupid funny name isn't great. But then if it's a fun light game, then all the more. Then have these games. So just make them appropriate. And then my second tip is really make them memorable. I mean, like, it's great if you have the 5-7 polysyllabic name, but then none of the players are going to remember. And in my player notes, I'm going to write your name and not your character name.
Yes.
Like, oh, Urim's character did this. Andre's character did this. So, I mean, you gotta work with the room, guys. Especially now that a lot of us are playing role-playing games
Multiple
online
games.
via Discord, via Google Meet, or whatever. So you can't exactly have a name card that has your name on it.
Yeah.
At least Discord lets you set custom nicknames, but if you're on a Google Meet or a Zoom, it may not always happen. So be nice. Like, if you want people to use your name, then make sure it's a name that people can say.
If you are celebrating diversity and you've chosen to have a name that's very accurate to a foreign language, that's nice. I applaud you for choosing to do that. But if that then has the entire group struggling every session to say your name, then there is a problem there, because then it's affecting the fun for everyone in the group. You want to always find a way to balance doing something interesting with doing something that everyone will have fun with.
Yeah, and I think that's the general tone of everything we're saying today. Like, character creation is not a process in isolation. It is a process of making a character that will contribute to the group story that you are all building together. And whenever you make decisions that are just for you, with either no benefit or sometimes to the detriment of other players at the table, then maybe it's not the greatest thing to do for your character.
Yes.
I mean, you can do it, that's fine, but don't complain when people mispronounce your name every time, or that they don't know that you have a dark secret in your past that turns out to be page 5 of your backstory. So, sorry, we didn't read it.
So, yeah, ultimately, character creation, not in a vacuum, as Rocky mentioned. And character creation is ultimately, they're your babies. They're a new person you're bringing into being because you'd like to play them for an amount of time. And in as much as, yes, it's just a game, you are devoting some hours of your life to being this being.
Your average RPG session is still 2 to 3 hours. That's like a movie, guys. That's a long movie.
So yes, you can choose to make it all funny. You can choose to throw whatever sticks because it's fun. That's fine, and we won't tell you how to have fun. But just make sure that you're all in the same page in that gaming group when you choose to do that. Because if not, then you have now other people who are investing that same amount of time, and they'll feel like they wasted it because they're struggling to have fun with someone who seems to be having fun all by themselves.
Mm. And then at the same time, and this is like again my last note is like, for any player, it takes a while before you figure out your own character. You can spend as much time as you want prepping, writing, tweaking stats. But I think until you actually play the game and then start role playing as that character and speaking with that character's voice, figuring out what your character's voice is, it takes a while. And
Hi, Reniel.
hello, Reniel. First time we've seen you on the stream, but yeah, but if it is harder, it is hard for you to find that voice and figure out your own character. Then what more for other players who are also trying to fully get into their role, get into the shoes of their Batman style ranger.
Yes.
Because again, it's a group experience. Everybody's trying to celebrate their characters, and then at the same time, you also want to figure out yours. And yeah, to some degree, try to make it easier for everyone. It'll mean more awesome stories for you, and you can get away. It's the faster that you can graduate from the awkward, like, I keep forgetting I can do this moments for my character sheet, and just focus on creating awesome story moments and pushing the plot and all that. That's my last note as a player.
So yeah, that was a lot of tips that we have shared about creating characters for tabletop role-playing game sessions. It is not the only time we will tackle different facets of tabletop role-playing games.
And then ultimately, these are our opinions. We're not saying that they're rules or anything like that. I mean, everybody approaches this differently. This is just our perspective on how we think you can create awesome characters that support awesome group stories.
That was more than 30 minutes.
The chicken is ready.
We had a lot of fun, and we hope you'll join us again next time.
If you have questions or suggestions for future episodes, or like follow-up questions you want to ask about our thoughts on this part of tabletop role-playing game, or anything else.
Or if you have other facets about tabletop role-playing games you'd love to hear our opinions about. Maybe you want to hear how to do combat more interestingly.
Then fill up the Google form at bit.ly Baduy Pride Ideas. Today's episode topic was actually suggested by one of the regular viewers who didn't tune in today, who is Pico. Thank you for today's topic.
Pico, we're so sorry. You probably thought there was no show on a Wednesday.
Yes. But again, follow us on Twitter. This is all Toby No Shade. I am RG Suniko.
You can also check out our blog. That's baduypride.com. You'll find all the previous episodes and stuff about us. Oh,
Yay,
Pico's here!
Yes, this was your episode. Okay, so yeah, feel free to continue the conversation in the comments below. What are your tips for other people getting into tabletop RPGs and how to create fun characters?
What are your secret strategies in getting through the process? Do you like follow a certain number of steps that you don't let others know about?
Do you name your characters by letters of the alphabet based on iteration?
Or on your X's?
Ooh.
I
do not recommend that.
Tell us, as we'd love to hear about it.
Be sure to subscribe for notifications, whether on Facebook or YouTube, so you don't miss our next live stream, especially when you suggested the topic. Wait, there's a last thing.
So given it takes a long time to make them, would you say it's a good idea to actually have characters planned out before the actual game? That fully depends on your group.
Yeah.
Some groups actually spend for the first few sessions planning. Other groups, because it's a one-shot, well, let's make it on the fly. And there are even some, like some sessions where the characters are pre-created or pre-generated. So ultimately, it depends. But I guess in general, what do you think? Create a character before the game
I
starts?
think if you are familiar and confident enough with the system, it's never bad to figure out your character concept and like get stuff down. But at the same time, I wouldn't set anything in stone.
Yes.
Use pencil and not pen. Because again, you may want to make tweaks or adjustments based on what the group says. Or again, it's that situation of, oh, are we a party of healers? Do we want to be a party of healers? And maybe we should change that. And then you can shift.
So don't be afraid to have a short list of your ideas.
Yeah.
But don't set anything in stone until you hear from everyone else.
That's why you can also take the Urim approach, where you come to the game with 10 concepts, and one of them is bound to be useful.
Wait. No, I can use this one. I like this one.
So that's another option if you really enjoy character creation, and there are people who like just making characters. But yeah, okay.
Let's wrap up.
Any more questions? Yeah, feel free to let us know in the channels we provided. Once again, I'm Rocky.
And I'm Toby.
And this is Baduy Pride. Thank you very much for joining us on a surprise Wednesday night.
And someday, let's game.
Yes, we should. We would love to game with you. Bye.
Bye-bye.